Everybody, man, this is Anthony Brogdon, and boy, I got a smooth guy on the channel today. Let me tell you, he's so smooth, he jotted down some thoughts on a piece of paper. He don't want to leave nothing uncovered. In this interview on Strong Inspirations, where we give it to you straight, no chaser. I do not fool with you, my friends. Thank you for watching me from around the world. And I got followers around the world. I'm an ordinary guy trying to do something extraordinary. And it's people like this gentleman right here who come on the show that make it happen, that allows me through them to give you this history of Black history. We talk about other stuff too. We talk about wellness and mental stability and so on and so forth. But that's the perspective to make you enlightened that much more. And I thank you for watching me, my friends. So do a favor, hit the subscribe button. It's free. It don't ask no information. It just let me know you like me. Hit the like button on this video. You're gonna love it. I'm telling you, my man is prepared. He got a backdrop with books behind him. He ready. And then tell somebody about Strong Inspiration. Don't keep it to yourself. Let me say this right now. I'm so excited. I forgot to tell you I'm Anthony Brogdon. That's who I am. And let me tell you a few more things about myself. I'm jamming in my own way. I got a documentary out titled Business in the Black. I toured it to over 40 cities across America, and it is streaming on Amazon. It deals with the rise of Black business in America, and it's good. I also have a book out. It's titled Black Business Book, and it has become the America's #1 Black business history book on the market. There is no other book as thorough as mine. You got to get you a copy of that. And I'm so confident that a couple things happen. One, I give away copies to schools across America. So for every 10th book that I sell, I donate one to a school. And we're over as 800 books donated, something like that. And let me say this, I'm so confident in the book that you will learn something new. It comes with a money back guarantee. Boom shaka laka. You read my book, and if you know everything in the book, I give you your money back. And no questions asked. Now, the other thing that I'm doing is I am producing a movie based on the book. The movie is titled They Did It. We're in the last days of filming, then it's edit, and then, my friends, we premiering this bad boy in several cities across America. And then it will be on some of them streaming services. You got to see this film. It's good, not just because I wrote it, not just because I'm producing it, but I'm the director too, everybody. I got it all covered. I got a camera crew and all that. I ain't doing that part. But it's good. And if you want, you can get your name in the film, your company name, your parents' name, whatever you want. And this is just a limited time until the credits have ended. I mean, not the credits, but the edit has ended. And that should be probably by the middle of September, maybe. But all that information that I do is on my website, which is businessintheblack.net. And you've seen, I'm going from that to several of the videos on this show. I got one of them with a guy who goes in them pyramids in Africa and tells you what you see firsthand. He wrote a book about it. Watch that video. I got Frederick Douglass's great-grandson on the show. Maybe 2-3 times great. Watch that video. Just as this gentleman here is going to talk about researching your history, your family roots, there are other videos on the show of similar nature. look for them. And so that's what we do here at Strong Inspirations. And now you hear me use this term strong a lot. Strong is my favorite word. I like what strong stands for. And in my world, it stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to my guest today. He's a strong man. Come on, sir. Please introduce yourself. Let's get it on. Thank you for being on Strong Inspirations.
Thank you for having me. You're a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. My name is Chris Nordmann. I got interested in Black history years ago when I was an undergraduate student in Mobile, Alabama. I am originally from St. Louis. I'm in St. Louis now. I moved back. But I got interested in Black history as a student at Spring Hill College in Mobile during our, I guess it was my second year when we had a course, the first half of U.S. history. And part of what we did was we learned about slavery. Of course, knew slavery existed, but didn't know any of the details.
Okay.
And I think that's when I was exposed to probably one of the better books at the time on American slavery.
Sure.
And just found it very interesting and fascinating, and learned a lot.
Okay, let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there because
Yes.
I want to talk about you just a brief moment, and let my audience know a little bit about you. And you say you were raised where?
St. Louis.
St. Louis. Well, okay. How about this one? And I mean, no disrespect. What neighborhood were you raised in? Was it the black people was on one side of the street or the city, and you were on the other? Was it? Did you grow up around black people? May I ask that?
You may ask that. No, I didn't grow up around Black people per se. I grew up when I was in kindergarten, up until my kindergarten, when I was in middle of kindergarten, we lived in South St. Louis. And then in the middle of that kindergarten year, we moved to St. Louis County, not too far from the city limits, relatively speaking, but it was predominantly white neighborhood, yes. And
okay. How about this one?
When I was
So, what did you think of black people growing up?
I probably didn't think anything differently than probably. I don't know. I guess I really never thought about it too much.
Yeah.
My brothers were. I'm the youngest of 8, so my brothers were around more Black people in their college years, particularly, as was I. They played basketball at the local university.
Okay.
Their teammates were Black. They were friends with the Black people. There were a handful of Blacks in my high school class.
Okay.
I knew a couple of them.
Okay.
That were in classes.
What
I didn't.
Okay, how about this one? Did you know of racial strife anywhere?
Personally?
Personally, or did you
I'm
see
sure
it on the news, anything like that?
I'm sure I must have had it on the news because we had the news on, the evening news.
Yeah.
I don't remember, my memory isn't all that great as far as,
Yeah.
Growing up and when grade school and high school, when some of the more horrible events were occurring in our country. Yes.
Yes.
So, I mean,
Yes.
it was kind of hard not to, to escape everything that was happening. One way
Did
or the
somebody
other.
tell you, and it's getting to the heart of how you get to be so conscious that you are. Did somebody tell you don't go on that side of town, be leery of black people?
I think we knew where in St. Louis, uh, where more of the Black people live than they do today, for example. But I mean, you knew not to go there. You knew not to go in certain parts of town at night. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think.
And, And so,
But the only way you get to know people is to sit down and talk to them as you and I are doing.
yeah, right, right. And so, what was maybe one of your early interactions, like you said in college?
Yeah.
What was it? What is it?
Um,
Were you shocked at something that you learned about Black people that got you some curiosity?
Good question. I don't know. My experience in college was started before I got to Mobile, which is where I attended college. When they assigned roommates to us, and I got the name of my roommate, and I thought, just judging by his name, he might have been a Black person, and he was a Black person. We were roommates freshman year. We got along well. He was a quiet person. I was a quiet person. I still am a kind of a quiet person, and he was kind of a religious person.
Okay,
Uh, Kind of kept to himself, very studious. And after our freshman year, I said, "Would you like to stay roommates?" And he said, "Yes." So we
really?
obviously got along. Yes.
Yeah. So
I kind of knew him, and we knew each other, and it worked out.
so hold on, now we're gonna stay on this just a tad more. In Mobile, there's a lot of Black history in Mobile.
And I've been
Did
working
you see that? And as you were beginning to go on this quest?
not as a not so much until I started working on my dissertation and did the research. I mean, I was too busy with college courses and friends and the normal things that you do in starting up in college. And I didn't have transportation outside of the campus, which was kind of a city within a city.
Yeah, sure, sure,
Uh, so, I guess I learned a little bit more, maybe my senior year when I did have a car and I had friends who were living off campus.
sure.
But as far as Mobile history, no, I don't remember hearing much, if anything, about it
So what
until
happened to
really I
you?
started.
What happened to you? How did you become this guy to study this history? What clicked for you?
Okay, well, well, as I said, as an undergraduate, the course on American history when we studied slavery, I finished undergraduate, went back to St. Louis, went back to school in Louisiana, and needed a topic for my master's thesis. I was still interested in Black history and wrote some local topic on one of the local parishes near the university. I was still unsure what I wanted to do after that, so I worked for 2.5 more years, went back to school, got an assistantship at the University of Alabama, and it came time to figure out what I wanted to do my dissertation on. And I was still interested, of course, in Black history. And I was told, oh, you need to see Professor Gary B. Mills, who at the time was on the faculty at the Gadsden branch of the university. I was in Tuscaloosa. I met with him because he was the he was white, but he was the historian of Black Americans. When I met him, he was working research on every free person of color in the state of Alabama. He and
Wow.
his wife had literally gone around each of the counties in the state and did research on free people of color. And I met him, I don't remember exactly when it was, maybe in 82 or 83. Uh, and we got to talking, and he said, why don't you take and do the work for Mobile and Baldwin counties, which were ethnically different, uh, culturally different than the rest of the state. The rest of the state being termed Anglo-Alabama because of their more British uh, uh, background, settled by more British people than the Mobile area, which was settled by the French and the Spanish. I said, I asked him a couple of questions before I got into it, and I said, "Is there enough there for a dissertation?" He and his wife, uh, they worked as a team at the time, and they gave me. Well, I asked him, "Is there enough there for a dissertation?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, I'll take your word for it." I was the graduate student, so I figured he knew what he was doing. He had done his own project as a graduate student in free people of color in Louisiana.
Okay.
I said, "Okay." So they gave me a list of names, primarily generated from census records. The list was, for Mobile alone, was 50 plus pages of names.
Well, that's quite a few names.
That's quite a few names, yes. Then they gave me 2 notebooks of their notes, I think exclusively from Mobile County probate court records.
Okay.
And I'd say maybe about maybe 1.5 total notebook pages, give or take. There were some empty pages in and either one of the two, but basically that's what it was.
Sure.
And they gave me a binder, just one binder of family group sheets. You know, family group sheet, for your audience that may not be familiar, is just a sheet of paper that is a form where you can list the names of the parents, the father's name, mother's name, specific information on each of those two, and spaces at the bottom of the sheet for the names of their children, along with vital information, dates of birth, dates, places of birth, marriages, death, occupations for the mother and the father, and importantly, a space to list the sources of the information.
Okay, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there. Let me no disrespect. When you began to say to some people in your circle that this is what you want to do for a career, what was their response?
So I don't think they thought I was crazy, because I kind of did a little research before I committed myself. Frankly, my father had passed away as I was in the final stages of preparing, and I wanted to do something different and something that was perhaps more meaningful to others by helping them find out their family history.
Oh.
And that's part of the reason why I decided to once I finished the degree, to pursue that path.
Okay, let's go to that path. Is what? You are a what?
I am a professional genealogist. I was certified by the board for certification of genealogists for a number of years. I have since lapsed on my renewals over the years.
Sure.
So I do research for individuals. I've done research for attorneys, for research companies to find missing heirs. So those are people who may die with an estate worth X amount of money, and they want to find, who's entitled to receive those funds.
What is the furthest? Go ahead.
I've also done, not to interrupt, I also, among other things in connection with that, I've done some writing, some publishing, and speaking, lecturing, teaching.
Okay. What has been, how far back have you gone? What I mean by that, in terms of somebody's family history.
Well, that's a good question. It depends on people's funds, how much money they can afford to examine their family history and how far they want to go back. Excluding Mobile, I'm guessing in the late 1700s, early 1800s, maybe.
Oh, really?
Somewhere along those lines, I think.
Have you gone back to Africa?
1800s. Yes and no. There are some in the Mobile research that I've done that have mentioned uh, where the place, I believe, was the Congo. And I don't know if that's a specific place or what, because I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, as far as a specific place, no. There are some Mobile people who I think were from I want to say Haiti, but I'm not sure if that's right. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
some other areas like that, yes. But no,
Oh,
I don't have really specific places within Africa. No,
oh, but I've heard of people telling me that they have traced their family roots to Africa.
I've heard that. I don't know anybody personally, but the only, I guess the only ones as far as maybe Mobile, which some of your audience and you may know, would be the descendants of the Clotilda.
Okay.
You're familiar with the
Yes,
Clotilda?
yes, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes,
Been a couple of books written on it and their
yes,
stories and the descendants and the finding of the actual ship and the museum that just recently opened up to the public in
yes,
outside of Mobile. That
yes,
that's a fascinating story in itself.
yes. Matter of fact, I
I
got,
got to
and I
do
cannot
the
think of his name, but I got the guy whose father, grandfather, was on that ship.
oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. I interviewed him because he's out of Africa Town. That's where he was born and
yeah.
raised, and so on and so forth. When you what let's go back to what you talked about earlier. Free blacks in Alabama. How when was this? How was that the case in some instances?
Okay, most of my, well, when I started initially, most of my research was from 1781 through 1865. Mainly 1781 because the Catholic Church began separate registers for African Americans, for Black people, slave and free. How did they get free? Some of them were freed by their owners. The status of the mother determined the status of the children. If the mother was a slave, then the children were slaves. If the mother was free, then the children were free. Some people in their wills uh, manumitted their slaves. Uh, there was one that was the public subscription had taken place in Mobile because of the work that he had done, and the people wanted him to be to free uh, family members. Sometimes freed their own slaves, their own family members
How did
through
that happen?
well, the process depended on the year and what was maybe legal or not legal. Sometimes, before the local courts, and other times you needed an act of the legislature to manumit a slave.
But now,
So it depended on the year.
when we talk about you living in Alabama and you free, how does that? What does that mean? That means that nobody can come along and just kidnap you and make you their slave because you have some legal rights.
Yes. Now, yes. Basically, the answer is yes. My I believe from my research with this, I'm speaking from Mobile, that conditions weren't as bad as some think people may tend to believe. And what I
Is
mean by
that
that is I
right?
think that unless the unless you brought attention to yourself, unless the authorities had some reason to haul you in, that a certain amount of the people, a certain amount of color in Mobile were pretty much left alone. Particularly the Creoles of Mobile, the Creoles of color in Mobile, and particularly those free blacks who lived outside of the city of Mobile. There are a good number of free people living in North County, Mobile, and in the southern half of Mobile County. I guess most of those would have been Creoles, and they were protected under under the treaty to have all the rights and privileges as were other people in that area.
Um, when you were free, did you have to walk around with a document saying I'm free? How did you prove that?
Um, yes, well, I think some of the people, particularly the Creole elements of the population, would have. I think people would have known who they were, so they probably didn't. I don't think it was necessary for them to carry any kind of documentation. Others probably should have if they didn't carry some sort of documentation. Others may, if they were brought in, have gone to court and presented some sort of evidence that they were free. Obviously was, if they could have some written proof,
Okay.
then, obviously to their well-being, so that they weren't kidnapped, as it were. So those, I mean, I'm sure there were, I'm sure it was, tenuous in certain times, particularly later, particularly after rebellions like Nat Turner Rebellion, when things got a little bit more tighter and in the South. So it depended on the time frame too.
And so you what when you look at a document, what does what, oh let's go through the process. Okay, I hire you. Give if you don't mind, give us as much as you feel comfortable. What you do? What's your questionnaire to me? What do you do? So that kind of thing.
Where do I
Yes,
start? Yeah,
yes,
yeah. Well, it depends. It depends on what information the prospective client has and what, if any, research a person has done. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, for discussion, that you want to know everything there is to know about your family history, beginning with yourself, and you know who your parents were and your grandparents. Okay, the first thing, and that's all, and you don't have any paperwork to support your findings. Uh, and except for personal knowledge. The first thing I do is look at federal census records, beginning with 1950, which is the the census that is the latest available to the public,
right, right,
and you have different online resources to look at a lot of records than census records, for example.
right,
So first thing I do is I get the census, and if you're old enough to be on 1950, for example, I'll locate you and your family if you have a family, and and to see where you lived, because people kind of generally know where they lived and when they lived, for yourself and
right.
your parents,
Sure, sure.
and however far back. Anyway, so basically you go from one generation, you go from what you know yourself and your parents, and then you go back and find them on the census, and then you go back another generation to locate your parents and then your grandparents and so forth. But you also want to, what I do is I do a thorough census research work, and go from 1950 and go back to 1940, which is the next available, and every 10 years backwards.
Right,
And then depending on the year, there are, well, particularly before 1900, there are different schedules of the census and different types of information uh, from one census back to the next. So once I have an idea of who I'm dealing with and where I'm dealing with, and have an idea of their ages, you take that information, as I say, from one census to the next, and work your way back, so you know where they lived and when they lived.
right,
Then you want to figure out, well, what records are available for those areas in which they live. So the easiest way to starting out, there are a couple of ways you can do it, but what I would do is I go on familysearch.org.
okay,
If it's a free website to trace your family history. They are under the watch of the Church of Latter-day Saints,
right,
Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons,
right,
and they have gone around the world to microfilm records. So you do a search for, let's say, Jackson County, Mississippi.
Right.
So you go on and you find out what records are available, and then you start going through the records. There are certain records that are that need to be looked at. Did they own property? They're deed records. There are mortgage records. There are usually indexes to these records.
Okay.
Are there church records? Do they belong to a church? Are there probate records? There are a number of different types of probate records that are useful for any ethnicity in tracing your ancestry.
Okay.
Especially African Americans, particularly when you're going back to the period around 1870 and before.
Okay.
So you go through the different types of records, and you begin to build a tree. If you want to build an online tree, there's software, numerous different types of software to help you in the process. And there are, as I say, I can run through some of the other different types of records
Sure.
if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay, there are local, state, and federal resources. For example, state records may be court records. Local, there may be court records. There may be different types of court records. Circuit court records, which usually deal with debt cases. There may be chancery court records, which can deal with a number of issues. There are, as I said, probate court. There may be local courts, for example.
Okay. Okay.
There are different schedules in the census records, particularly when you get back to 1880 and before, where there are mortality schedules that list the names of people who have died in a certain time frame. There are slave schedules. There are agricultural
Hold on, let me stop you
schedules.
there. What's the slave schedule?
Slave schedule was taken 1850 and 1860. For the majority of cases, there are some exceptions, not that many, but there are some that list the enslaver's name, and then it lists not by name, but it lists the age, the color, and the sex of a slave.
Okay.
And it may list the number of slave houses on the enslaver's property.
Okay.
But as I say, for the most part, there are no names. As I say, there are exceptions. So you get an idea if you're able to trace your ancestry back to 1870, for example, and you know the neighborhood, you can go to 1860 and try to locate the same neighborhood. And if you know the enslaver's name, then you can look on the slave schedule and try to match the approximate known age of your ancestor from, say, 1870 to what he might have been in 1860, to say that could very well be my ancestor listed on the list of that particular enslaver.
Let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you have other evidence and other records to corroborate to get from 1870 to 1860. There may be a probate record for the enslaver, say 1850, and he names the names of his slaves, for example.
In the instance, do you also look at newspaper clippings? Do you have to do that for some reason?
Oh, yes. There are a couple different websites that have newspaper databases, newspapers.com being one of them. Genealogy Bank has newspapers. There's a Chronicling America through the Library of Congress website has newspapers, and definitely, yes, you can do a search, depending on You can do a search for your person before 1870 and after, and I'm sorry, after 1870 when you have names and surnames. And then even before that, the enslaver's name and the community and the area in which they lived, and get an idea and a feel for what's going on in that area.
Okay.
So
When
so you can put things in context.
when do you have you had instance where you actually went to the family of an enslaver who had documents? You know, their descendant who had documents, and you were able to see those documents too to do the research? Is that a possibility?
That's a possibility, yes. I did some work, it's been a number of years off and on, for a woman whose ancestors and she knew who the enslaver was here in Missouri. On the other hand, I, I did work for somebody to a couple of years ago, and he was not familiar with his family history, and I was able to locate if I remember, at least one of his family's enslavers, if not two, and had the documentation, which he didn't have before. But
Okay.
in other cases, I'm sure that's possible too. Yes.
When the enslaver had relations with the slave woman, what, and then they had a child. Usually, what did you find to be the record of that child? Did the enslaver, and I'm sure nothing is cut and dry, but did the enslaver say, "I'm the father," or what usually happened in in those instances?
Sometimes they publicly acknowledged, other times they didn't. They may not have, but there were other records to establish paternity for that particular individual. And I'm speaking especially for the Mobile area. So that's, they may have acknowledged paternity in their will. They may have acknowledged paternity if there was a baptism of a child, or
Uh,
other probate records.
what's the oldest that you could see a photograph? When was photographs available, and that kind of thing?
Ooh. There were photographs during the American Civil War, so anytime after that. But you mean of the people that I've researched,
Is it just in general? I
or
mean,
any
yeah,
time in
yeah, yeah,
general?
yeah, yeah,
Oh, in general, when I say that there were photographs during the Civil War period, so
yeah.
anytime after
Okay.
that. But you know, I don't know that I don't know how far back would have been the furthest
Yeah.
back
Okay.
that I've seen that related to my work.
Yeah. When okay, let's say that somebody finds out, they have a clue that their grandfather, great grandfather, was lynched. Have you run across some of those instances and saw the newspaper clippings, saw the guy's name, that kind of thing? And you'll tell them
I
that news?
I would tell them that, yes. When you do this kind of research, whatever background and whatever ethnicity, you don't know what you're going to find. And if it's part of their history, then yes, I would tell them yes. Newspapers, I don't know that I can't offhand. I don't know of a specific case. There, if I remember correctly, too, when I was in graduate school at the University of Alabama, there was I think, a law professor who was researching lynchings in, I don't know if it was throughout the country, if it was just in the South or Alabama, but
Yeah,
so I mean, there are studies that have been done,
yeah, yeah.
and names
That might
that
be
are
the
out there for
lynching project.
people.
That's in
I'm not
Montgomery.
familiar. Okay.
Yeah, the Montgomery. Um, if somebody hires you and says, "Okay, fine, this, when are you done?" When you said this is as far back as I can go, you said I don't. It's going to cost you more money for me to go further. Usually, how does that work?
Well, when I start with a new client, I ask for a retainer of 5 or 6 hours. And then after that, then I submit a written report, and along with the raw research notes, I have a list of suggestions for further research. If they're interested in pursuing it, then I recommend, following up on those particular items. They may have different goals, different other things once they see the initial report.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends. Frankly, it depends on the money and how much they're willing to invest in the project.
Yeah.
If they want to go forward and they say, "Oh, money's no problem," or here they see an example of my work for 5 or 6 hours, they may bump it up and say, "Oh, here's 20 hours.
Right.
Continue the work on the same path that you're on."
Right.
And I try, when you start out, you don't want to go down too many rabbit holes. You want to kind of stay close to the main players of the family, at least to begin with, because you can always go down those rabbit holes, as it were, and do maybe others in the family, but it may not be a 100% direct line.
Oh,
So
I see.
it depends. I'm upfront with people when I do work to say, hey, as is Dr. Gates and his team on researching finding your roots, that sooner or later you are going to reach an end to the paper trail. You can look and look and look, but you get an idea of when it's time to tell somebody that your chances of finding something are less than when you
Okay.
started out.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
that's
sure.
my personal
Sure.
belief, and
Sure.
depending on who the person was and where they lived.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's say that if have you seen a record that said Bobby Joe, just I'm just throwing a name at you, escaped, and it's in the newspaper or something like that, and then he escaped from this plantation, and
Yeah.
and then you find him in Detroit or Chicago, any of that kind of thing.
Well, there are ads in the newspapers and for runaway slaves with various descriptions of the slave who ran away, physical descriptions, so they can identify somebody. I don't know that I've ever traced an escapee that way and found them later on in some other area. Uh, there was one free person of color in Mobile who put an ad in who thought that his daughter may have been snatched up and kidnapped. But and there are studies on runaway slaves too, and I think there's some databases that have been created.
Oh, is that right?
So
Oh, okay.
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What do you get out of this? What have you learned as you've done this all these years? Well, you tell somebody and say, "Hey, I'm so happy I do this for what reason?" That kind of question.
Just I'm in it to answer people's family questions so that they can learn more about themselves and their ancestors. I mean, that's the bottom line. Uh, so I'll go out of my way. If they pay for 5 hours, I'll do them. If it's something there, I'm not a stickler on time when it comes to that. But if there's something I can maybe give a little bit more and find something to add to their story. If I don't want to stop midstream,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So what I get out of it is helping them find their past so they can understand the present.
What
Help them
what what
understand the
when
present.
when when you hand them, okay, before I say when you hand them, what do you hand them? Okay, I've hired you. You've done these 5 6 hours. You hand me a booklet or a binder and says this is all the information I have found.
I had them make a report. The report has basic information on it: their name, their address, background information that they provided, the goals of the research, uh, where I did research, suggestions for further research, and most importantly, the raw notes that I have found listing the name of the source, the complete citation of the source, and the raw notes and a summary of my findings.
Okay.
And then if they want, well, when I started before computers and the internet are what they are today, I would literally put it in the mail with hard copies of the various records if they so desired.
Yeah.
Nowadays, most everything is done, through email. So you have
Right.
digital copies of whatever records you can get, whatever records you can find.
What's been some of the reactions of the people? I know it depends on what you tell them, but people, do they cry? Are they super happy? They're like, oh, okay, I know this now. What usually do they tell you?
Well, I hope they're pleased and satisfied and happy with the results.
Yeah, yeah, that you've gotten this information.
And I think that they understand the nature of the beast. That if somebody didn't leave a record, that there's one's not going to be found. I think they're happy to have found what I do find for them. I think some of them are surprised that I have found what I have found on their families,
Mhm.
and so forth.
I'm sure that there's a lot of they come back to you and say,
And
"I never heard that."
yeah, and it's something that they can pass that down to their children and their children's children. But yes, yes, there are times when that they didn't know something about their ancestors. For example, when you tell them if they're African American that their ancestors were free and that they owned other slaves who may or may not have been their own family members. You
Oh,
know,
okay.
it's something it's in their history. You can't get around it. I'd
Um,
like to mention too. I don't know how much
yes,
more time we have.
please.
Some of the
Yeah,
other briefly, and then you probably
yes,
have some other
please,
questions.
please.
Uh, More recently, the some work that I have done is with the Reckoning Inc. INC Incorporated Kentucky project. And what that is it's a 501c3 organization. They're a nonprofit, and they are tracing the lives and the families and hopefully descendants of Kentucky's Black Civil War soldiers.
Oh, okay.
Uh, I, as a researcher, we were given certain records if they existed for the soldier, like three or four main types of records, and then we would create trees on Ancestry with that information, and then do additional research with as much as we could find. So that's something else that I wanted people to be aware of if they weren't. I've posted about it on my Facebook page, and hopefully others have too, and have picked up on that.
Okay. So so you an expert at this,
I'll let you decide if I'm an expert.
but you
I
have
have
enough
experience.
years to say
I
that,
have.
I mean,
I I'd like to think that people would consider me an expert. Yes,
and you lecture on this also.
I have done some lecturing. Yes, uh, whether it's been in person or
Yeah.
with COVID, either online. But
So,
but yes.
but so
Uh-huh.
when you lecture, you usually talk about how you do the research, or mostly that.
Yeah, yes. How to do the research and the records, what you can expect to find in the different types of records, and where you can
Yes,
locate the records.
yes. Are there is there an association of genealogists and people like yourself, and there are levels that you aspire to be the top level of the field? Is there such a organization that critique people in that way?
Yes, there are two, well, probably three, but two come to mind immediately that I'm more familiar with, organizations. One is the Association of Professional Genealogists, but it's not a hierarchy of things. But you can, if you want to locate a professional, you can go online to their website and search their directory along with other
Okay.
information. If you're a professional, then you have things for in subject matters that deal with professional issues and whatnot. The other one is the Board for Certification of Genealogists, where you can become a certified genealogist by going through the rigorous process of following their what they required in order to fulfill that.
Okay.
They're different. They have I think also they used to have different categories of being certified. I think it's down to certified genealogist and certified lecturers in
okay.
genealogy too. But
Are there
yes.
initials? You know how people get letters behind their name? Is there
Mhm.
some letters for genealogists?
The those that are certified, uh,
Yeah.
if you're a certified genealogist, you're a CG, you can put after your name.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
the
Okay.
the other has other organization has similar initials after their name. Yes,
Okay. And you said you've written a book on this?
not on the process. No, I've I've written a. I did a little booklet for research for Mobile on
Okay.
the for Mobile research. I've written encyclopedia articles that are at least one of them, a couple of articles on they're online. I've done a book chapter on records for searching for African Americans. It was done a number of years ago.
Okay.
I've published different articles. I did an article on um, sources to document slave marriages that was published a number of years ago. And more recently, some things on Mobile, Alabama Creoles of color.
Okay. How do people
And
go ahead?
I was going to say I've been what two of the goals. A long story short, when I started my research for my dissertation, that my late mentor had, and I still have, is to write a biographical directory of each and every free person of color for me in the counties that I'm dealing with, that I've mentioned, and to write a narrative history uh, of the free people of color in the area that I've been working with. I have been working on that in some form or another for many years, which is basically for me to take my dissertation, revise and expand it with the additional research that I've done.
What has been I'm tooting your horn here, helping you do that. What has have you
Thank you.
been on TV and what's been your biggest client or something like that that you hang your hat on?
I think without a doubt, it would have been working with Professor Gates's team when they contacted me years ago when they were doing research for Oprah's family. I did some research on Oprah's family. When they initially contacted me, I thought they were interested in having a researcher go on site to Mississippi. So I had to look up to see exactly where her family was from. And as it turns out, I actually would drive through that area, that county, on my way from Alabama back to Missouri. As it turns out, I think they may have found somebody else to do on-site research, but I did research through online sources, through Family Search, in order to assist in finding her people.
Oh, okay, excellent. What is how do people find you? You have a website? How people who watch this, how do they contact you?
I have two websites. One is geared towards African American uh, history and genealogy. The website is Finding African American Ancestors, all one word, .weebly.com. Let me repeat, Finding African American Ancestors, all one word, .weebly, WEEBLY.com.
Okay.
I have a Facebook group that is in collaboration with the website. The Facebook group is Finding African American Ancestors.
Right.
I have two other related, another website and another Facebook group that aren't African American centered. And I can give you my email address. It is
If
the
you want
initial
to.
C,
Yeah,
is
sure.
C for Chris.
Right.
And then my last name is Nordmann, Nordman, C Nordman at gmail.com.
Okay. Okay, excellent. I
And
guess my last question is there a question that I have not asked you? You've alluded before, but just in case you got all your notes in and whatever you wanted to say, let's do it.
right. I think to summarize kind of everything, that it used to be said that, oh, you can't trace the lives of African Americans. There are no records. You can't do it. Well, I can say that after more than 30 years, I'm still finding records on the free people of color in Mobile, Alabama. So there are records out there. Not all of them are online, but there are plenty of records online through a number of different resources. I haven't mentioned only a couple of them. And not everything is online. So if you're really serious, then you hire somebody to get on-site research at the local courthouse. So
Okay.
I think that's the thing that I wish to take away. And one other point too that I'd like to highlight is that the research that I've done on free people of color, my mentor wanted to, and I certainly do as well, to highlight the accomplishments of free Blacks in this country.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, hey, thank you so very much for coming on. Everybody, I told you we're going to like this one. He put it to you where, in layman's terms, how he has dedicated his life as a career to helping, in particular, African Americans find their family tree. And it's a heightened awareness that is happening and has happened over the years, but I know it's happening now because there's this attitude towards Black history that is going around the country of only trying to tell what they like to call the good side of it. And there's so much more. So I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so very much. And so everybody hit the like button on this video. Subscribe to the channel. Tell somebody about Strong Inspirations, please, my friends. And to you, I want to say this, and I mean this with all sincerity. I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what you're doing. Somehow out of that St. Louis by way of Mobile, back to St. Louis, back to that neighborhood, back to running into somebody who said something to you to do some work for them. You took the mantle and has dedicated your life in this way. It's a beautiful thing. I thank you again for coming on the show. And with that, I'll say, bye-bye, we out.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.